Hey, what's up, guys? Continuing the Osprey books I have on the Imperial German Army in the World War, right? The First World War, of course, of the German Stormtrooper, or you can say the Stormtroopers, right? The famous. And the interesting things about them, the misconceptions and other ideas of what these soldiers were. Yeah, with some really good. Oh, this had some really good, obviously photos, a lot of things on the weapons, but a lot of good art. This one had particularly really good art, and I'll show you in the back. But of course, this picture. This is actually a bigger version of the picture in the first book. This was the early trench raiding party. Right? Actually, as you can see, they took the spike off because it was worse than useless. It was they could see you, the trenches. You can see these spikes running back and forth. You can imagine. You see, man, dude, these guys are ready for war, bro. Obviously, these are to cover the trenches, right? You think of like the old siege warfare, but in terms of the idea of the stormtroopers, right? All the armies had an idea of how to attack, essentially to break the static lines that had built up. The Germans seemed to be the most successful at it. Of course, also you had in the Alpine front the Ardites, right, in the Italy. Yeah, and you had other, you had British and French officers trying to develop these things, but it never really got to the level what the Germans had, right? The idea that they were doing modern warfare, trenches suppressed by machine gun fire, right? Because you had mobile machine guns. You weren't sitting behind a trench. You had guys with these machine guns, in a team, and then assaulting the trenches with grenades and then getting in close. So, of course, a lot of the interesting thing was that there was no idea where they go. Okay, we must create these special soldiers. They developed independently throughout the different parts of the German army. Now, remember, like in the first book, right? There were 22 corps, districts of the Imperial German Army. Germany was, not a monolith country. It was all these different kingdoms, duchies, and whatnot. The Imperial German Army was fiercely independent. Oh, they're the Huns. They just follow their Kaiser mindlessly, right? So you had different groups developing sort of what you would get into of these assault tactics of using light infantry. You already had the Jaeger battalions, who were the skirmishers historically, the country boys with the rifles. They already were one of the things that sort of developed into that. They actually, it wasn't a single person came up with an idea. It was different people coming up with different ideas. The ideas of them popping up in the different units, different sections of the front. Not to mention, they had the German regimental officers, accustomed to less interference in their tactics, had more freedom to experiment. The Germans had more freedom. Was ist los? Right, right. Everything was top down, particularly with the French, but also with the British. But obviously, the Germans always said, "Okay, this is what we want you to do. You figure it out how to do it." So there was a lot more flexibility. Of course, this was in both wars. So obviously, the Pickelhaube looks cool, but it must go. And we get the Stahlhelm. Anyway, just going. I go with the weapons, man. You get all the weapons. The original flamethrowers was 2 guys. Like, oh man, jeez. Yeah, of course, the first effective submachine gun. Remember, the Italians made the first submachine gun, but the Germans made the first effective one. I guess the MP-18. Look at that. You forget you had this. You had a submachine gun. So, also you had, of course, the Mauser, the Gewehr, different Mausers. And as always, the Germans took whatever weapons they could. They loved the Lewis guns that the British had. The ones with that round drum at the top of the gun. Man, when they got their hands on that and used them whenever they could. The Germans were really good at that, about like converting other countries' weapons, like Russian artillery, in both wars, and then cutting them to use their own artillery. Look at that. Look how cool the Luger, right? The stock, right? Look at this. These things were good up to 100 meters. So this pistol with a stock became a carbine and became effective. And look, you have that cool drum clip there too, like you have here. God knows how many rounds are in there. So all this, all this nerdy stuff aside, it's like, geez, to use it, this is this is what this all means in the end. Right? They talk about particularly how the war changes in 1916, the Somme, where the British are just like F this and the French, and they just mass artillery and start blasting the hell out of the Germans, who then have to alter their defensive tactics. Most German soldiers ignored regulations and kept dying. What? These Germans are not following the orders. What is this? Anyway. And this is another interesting too, the idea like you had stormtroopers, but the idea that they were having manpower problems, but the organization, the original stormtrooper battalions, had not sucked the lifeblood of ordinary regiments. They had been training units. The personnel had eventually returned to their original regiments to pass on new ideas and methods and contribute to a constant leveling up of tactical skill. It's probably why they lasted as long as they did. And there's the Lewis gun. Like, yeah, the Germans liked this one. They liked it better than the one they came up with, actually. So they captured a lot of these. So yeah, it's just the photos are really great. You know, the idea, I like this. Ludendorff was not the pompous martinet he appeared. He had no time for the niceties of drill, right? And this drill, he remarked, simply deprives young men of their personalities. And of course, they would take the guys out of the line for training. Another thing the Germans did in both wars, right? They remained under control of the officers at all time, including training periods behind the lines. In both wars, the German army ensured that its private soldiers had the strongest possible bond between them and their regiment. Each regiment was recruited from a particular town and district, and a small cadre of officers and NCOs stayed there at the outbreak of war, ready to train the new recruits. Throughout the war, officers and NCOs from the regiment would return to the depot to supervise the training of new personnel. Returning wounded would be posted back to their old unit, returning to familiar faces. What that does for morale, obviously, the American army in World War II was like the opposite. But in general, you can see, the organizations that the Germans had, particularly even with conscription, emergency conscription, you can say it almost borders on autistic levels. So, of course, right, the new defensive tactics mainly is responsible to the terrible power of the British artillery, released on the Somme. So they became up with the last defense. So anyway, of course, you gotta always have this, man. We need food here. Right, World War One imposed an unprecedented psychological burden on frontline soldiers. It's amazing all these men didn't go insane, and many of them did. Even Ernst Junger, if you read the Storm of Steel, there's a point where he goes insane, but he got out of it. It was interesting. Look at this. I didn't even know they had these. They had little grenade launchers, too. Like, interesting. All right, enough. I mean, this is the reality of it. Like, a lot of this guy looks like he's smiling, right? Rest in peace, man. We get to the artwork. Just real quick, I know I'm kind of going over stuff sort of pretty straight ahead. Talk about the gas warfare, right? At one point, all they did was just increase the concentrations of the gas, right? To the point where there's no oxygen to come through the filters at all. So obviously one of this man, some NCO from the Bavarian Reserve Regiment, was blinded by mustard gas temporarily. Who is that man? I don't know. The unprecedented carnage on the battlefield, right? The idea of disease, right? The Russo-Japanese War was the first one where most of the armies didn't die of disease. And the German army was also pretty good at shielding itself from the typhus epidemic that inflicted such terrible suffering on the Serbs and the Russians, right? Delousing their own men. But of course, influenza hit everybody. Damn thing killed more people than the war. Right? Few German families escaped the soaring fever and hacking coughs, right? My grandmother, she had the influenza. And then afterwards, she got diphtheria, and they had to do a tracheotomy on her. Poor grandma. She was like, maybe she was a little girl. So, yeah, 2 million German soldiers died. Everyone cries about their war dead, as they should, but the Germans were fighting the whole world. So now, let's get to the art. You see, the early on, you see the trench raids. You see them training. The Stormtrooper training, the Stormtrooper training was they tried to simulate as much as they could. The actual combat conditions, actual fortifications, live ammunition. Pretty nifty. You see, look at this. Just fucking Absolute mayhem. Jesus Christ. Of course, the Alpine Front, right? You got Württemberg battalions, of course, fighting the Italians, helping the Austro-Hungarians. I like this one, the guys playing cards. Yeah. Of course, you see the great artwork. Just an example of the different banners, the different insignias, equipment, like Cambrai, right? The amazing tank attack at Cambrai, which then was undone by the Stormtrooper counterattacks. Yeah, you get there, getting ready. Here we go. I like those designs. It looks almost like a modern art design on the helmet. I love this one here. They take a British, trench battery, in March, and they're like, yeah, yo, I got some real beer. My man got some rum. That's right. Look at, of course. Unfortunately, all these supplies are showing that the U-boat campaign is not strangling Britain. They're getting all these supplies. So it's not going to be good. And of course, my favorite one at the end, okay, that you come back, you can't believe you've been beaten, you're still ready to fight, and you come back and you got these red scum taking over Germany. So, yeah, right, yeah, that's right, take that. Yeah, you're going to take this? Are you kidding me? So, took care of that shit. They showed you how to take care of communists, huh? Amazing. So, then they had to go after the Poles, grabbing all their land in the east. But the great artwork, pretty much showing the idea of a number of the Freikorps men, of course, with Starstruppen. So just going here, they just talk about the actual battles in terms of like how things developed over time. It's really interesting, man. It's a lot. I like how they mentioned, right, the Flanders, the Somme, Passchendaele, they evoke a particular chill in British hearts. But in all those battles, the Germans probably lost more guys. Because remember, they're not just fighting the British, they're fighting the French. And like I said, aggressive infantry was the key to German success. Not the material Schlacht, right? The battle of material. It's always the battle of material. Well, was the tank battles I had mentioned with the French tanks. I liked how the French tanks look. They look kind of cool. They look like tractors. But the German, I'll tell you, knocked the hell out of them. The British were more successful, as you can see, with their tanks. Okay, the rhomboid shape was the only thing that could actually cross the trench. Nothing else could. And anyway, so pretty much, you know how this is gonna end. Right? The Germans are gonna lose the war. Government's gonna be overthrown, changed, chaos back home. People starving. A lot of angry guys, want to avenge their comrades. But I like this. I like, hey, comrade, take a picture. It's like, remember the German tank corps. 2/3 of the tank corps were made up of these Mark IV tanks that they captured. So, that's a Minenwerfer. What is that? That's a mortar. Right? Anyway, just a really cool book. The Stormtroopers. Right? It's funny how in Star Wars the Stormtroopers can't fight for shit. So it's almost like an insult. It is an insult. We know why. So meanwhile, these dudes were probably some of the best damn soldiers this world's ever seen. Straight up. Glad we fit against them. I only wish we'd won. And mind you, though, I'm also anti-war. Oh, you caught me. No. I wish this never happened. You know how it is, man. It's the conflict. It's the tension of opposites.